And sometimes these experiences, mystical experiences of union with a greater consciousness than our own, happen spontaneously. Sometimes they happen through actual practices like meditation. Sometimes they happen during psychedelic experiences. And one of the ways in which they happen, perhaps surprisingly, is through spiritual experiences in sport.
We don't know the past or the future, but we think we know the present. The moment of the present, T.S. Eliot's still point of the turning world, provides us with our observations of the world, the evidence for science, and the content of our consciousness. However, philosophers and neuroscientists have argued that the present is unattainable and unknowable. Poststructuralists, like Derrida, claim that there is no now that provides direct and immediate access to meaning. Our descriptions are just part of a shifting web of meaning that we can never get to the bottom of, and it's also limited by our culture and by our history. Leading neuroscientists claim that the reality that we perceive in the present is a form of a hallucination, or some interface that's been evolved for survival. Do we need to give up the idea that the present is a moment of truth that provides the reality of experience, and are our descriptions of the present always undecidable and indeterminate? Or is the notion of a fixed present essential if we're to create and to judge our theories and accounts of reality, without which we would be hopelessly lost? Joining us today, Joanna Kavenna is an award-winning writer. She's written 6 books and has written for The New Yorker, The Guardian, and London Review of Books. Rupert Sheldrake is a scientist and author. He was previously a biochemist at Cambridge University and is a fellow at Shoemaker College. Timothy Morton is a professor and Rita Shea Guffey Chair in English at Rice University. Timothy is a leading member of the object-oriented philosophy movement. Welcome. So to start this off, does the present moment exist, or is it just some illusion that we construct? Joanna.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming. So I guess this is such a obviously interesting, complex subject, and I have a 3-minute present to try to, in any way, sort of intervene in. And there's a big question here, which I hope we'll discuss, which is a big question about experience versus a kind of mechanical measurement of time, a symbolical clock time, and the difference between those, that what we're all doing, and then the way in which things are measured. But I just wanted to tell you a very quick story about time and the present. It's a very old story, and it's about the story of Chuang Tzu. It's in an ancient Taoist text. And he's the man who woke from a dream. In his dream, he'd been dreaming that he was a butterfly and he was fluttering around, doing what he pleased and having a really nice time. And there's a moment, a present moment when he wakes, where he thinks, am I a man dreaming he's a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming he's a man? Or, am I a butterfly dreaming he's a man dreaming he's a butterfly? This kind of total uncertainty where you have no knowledge whatsoever of your existential state. And the only way that he is released from uncertainty is if the moment changes. So it's possible this idea that the present, the now, is this fixed moment of total clarity. It could be quite the opposite, is the moral of that ancient fable, that you could actually find yourself without any further context, without any further limits or comparison, in this moment of maximal uncertainty and illusion. And in this moment now, we could say, well, what about the poor butterfly? Maybe the butterfly's had a bad dream that it was a man dreaming it was a butterfly, so that would be bad. And also in this tent, you could be trapped in a moment where there's a random person on stage talking to you about butterflies forever. So the moment must shift for us to move to something beyond that moment. So that would be my initial intervention, but clearly this is a very deep and broad subject. Thank you.
Now to bring us beyond the butterfly, Rupert.
From a scientific point of view, everything is wave-like, quantum particles, everything's rhythmic. It's true of us too. We have countless rhythmic processes within our bodies, brain waves, heartbeats, breathing rates, sleeping and waking cycles and so forth. So everything in nature is wave-like. An electron is a wave-like pattern. And one of the insights of quantum theory is that you can't have a wave at an instant. I mean, it's obvious. A wave takes time to wave and space to wave in. And that's the reason for the uncertainty principle. You can't actually say, well, this electron is this wave is at this exact instant, because you need at least a wavelength for a wave to be a wave. So I think that the present, even in the most microphysical sense, is spread out in time. And our own experience of the present is spread out in time. It's what Alfred North Whitehead called the specious present. Our experience of the present is spread out over, it is a variable amount of time, but we're talking hundreds of milliseconds at least. And the reason all of us have experienced this, most obviously, is through going to the cinema. Because in the cinema, you have old-style cinema, you have a series of still frames which, projected fast enough, create the illusion of movement. And so you see people moving around on the screen instead of a series of slices in time of still photos. That's because our minds automatically average over a given period, and we create this illusion of movement. So I think that that's one important point, that we have this extended present. Some experiments by the neuroscientist Libet made this point in a rather surprising way. If you stimulate somebody with a mild electric shock or with a sound for 100 milliseconds, they don't notice it. 200 milliseconds, they don't notice it. 300 milliseconds, they don't notice it. But when you get to 500 milliseconds, they do notice it. But the time they think they first heard it is when it first started, not 500 milliseconds later when they first noticed it. It's sort of they backdate the experience. So so point one is that the present is spread out in our own experience. The second point, I think, is that the present is what, for the whole of nature, when interactions can occur. We can have memories of what happened in the past, we can have desires and intentions about the future, but the only time in which we're actually interacting with other people, with the world, immediately interacting, is in the present. Like now, we're all bathed in light, and the light's falling on our skins and is being absorbed by our clothing and so forth. That's happening in the present. It can only happen in the present. It can't happen in the past or in the future. And all the other interactions that are happening in the present. So the present is that slice of time in which interactions occur, physical interactions.
Timothy.
I'm actually feeling a lot of emotion. It's the end of the day. And I'm very honored to be on the panel with Joanna and Rupert. I've been a fan of Rupert's work since I was a teenager, so this is very big for me. It's very moving. But I take comfort in the fact that, an emotion, in a way, is an idea from the future. It's an idea that you haven't had yet, right? Like, ideas have already been established. We have words for them. They are the output of various social and whatever scientific and whatever feeling, thinking processes of whatever kind. You go to a therapist because you are having a feeling. You can't put words to it yet, right? So when I write, I'm always trying to be in my feelings because I think my feelings are like ideas from the future. To this extent, the future and the past are saying something to each other in an interesting, weird, paradoxical way. And it seems to me that it's like this. The way they are kind of sliding over each other is creating this nowness, which is very much more of a kind of a feel or a feeling or whatever you want to call that, emotion. This thing here is a map, of everything that happened to this thing here, right? Like when I was 19, I got this acne. I was this poster child for the Roaccutane, and you can still sort of see on my face. Thanks for smiling, possibly not laughing about that. But who is this Tim Morton guy? What are they really saying, right? That's the future. So this thing here is like a weird kind of junction where the past and the future are kind of sliding over each other without touching. And this relative motion between the past and the future is a thing that I call nowness is very different from the present, which is a kind of an artificial dot on a line. And one reason why we're all here is because we all got gaslighted by Wikipedia, but also by the confusion of the measurement of time, which often consists of little dots on lines or whatever, with actual time.
So, do we ever truly experience the present moment? Or is it always slipping into the past? And I mean that in two senses. So number one, photons are hitting your eye and then you are processing that and then you perceive it. Something akin to that. So you could say that that occurred not now, but a few moments ago. That's one way to interpret that the present is slipping into the past. Another one is that anytime you point out the present, you're pointing out something that is now slipped into the past. You've mentioned that there's somehow an aspect of the future embedded in emotions, which I didn't think about. But either way, the present moment, is it something we actually experience, or do we experience the past / in your case, the future?
May I? Is it in a funny way? Because of the very simple stuff about, I'm not a neuroscientist, but maybe a couple of hundred milliseconds, right? Like this stuff that you're experiencing right now is like slightly delayed by a couple of hundred milliseconds. So to use the fancy word, phenomenologically speaking, the biosphere is in the future, or rather it is the future. This actual physical being that we have is the future. And what we're experiencing is always a little bit time shifted, right? So in a funny way, we are kind of alienated from this future that is just 100 milliseconds away from the experience. And if I was going to be theological sounding about it, which I really want to be sometimes nowadays, I would sort of say, maybe the Garden of Eden is just a couple of 100 milliseconds in the future, right? We're alienated not from the past, but from the future. Yeah, like if it was so great, how come we got alienated from it in the first place? In a funny way, it's like we're alienated from just being fully the beings that we could be, but really it's just like a couple of 100 milliseconds away. It's not that far away.
Joanna, are we alienated from the present moment? You also mentioned in your opening talk the 3-minute present. Can you even have a slice that large?
Yeah, so, I guess fiction, literature, poetry is really transfixed by this. How you describe, the dominant mode in the novel, for example, is the past tense. And that's the notion, of course, recounting the thing has happened. You're going to recollect in tranquility as the romantics thought. And otherwise, Ezra Pound, the apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. So that question, you can do this kind of imagistic, fractional, fragmented rendering of our own imagistic, fractional, fragmented experiences. It's the point at which you narrativize. You then start moving into the past tense more naturally. And that's a strange thing that we all do. We then complete this experience that was itself a very diffuse, immediate, dispersed experience that didn't have this kind of narrativization. And that brings you into further conventions. And I think there are lots of novels written in the present tense. And there's various things you obviously can't do. It's really interesting. So you can't clarify whether a character's unconscious or dead if they're in the present tense in the first person. I'm feeling a bit dizzy, I'm falling over, everything's going black. And then we don't know, because that's where the immediacy of that experience, you have to then have some further clarification that situates them in a more rendered, either then something else comes in, and they were dead, or they got up later and it was all fine. So there's a strange incompleteness, of course, in any attempt to present that in fiction. And Thomas Mann writes ceaselessly, spending huge amounts of time in his novels about how impossible it is to do any of this while kind of doing it. So there's this paradox you immediately get into as soon as we start trying to render it. We're into another of these strange paradoxes of the process of experience meeting language.
In mystical experiences, people often say that they're fully in the present. And I've had experience, I'm sure everybody here has had experiences when they felt they were completely in the present. And one of the points of spiritual practices is being in the present. And sometimes these experiences, mystical experiences of union with a greater consciousness than our own, happen spontaneously. Sometimes they happen through actual practices like meditation. Sometimes they happen during psychedelic experiences. And one of the ways in which they happen, perhaps surprisingly, is through spiritual experiences in sport. Some people find that they can't get into the present very easily with meditation, their mind's wandering just too much. But in sport, you have to be completely in the present. If you're 50 feet up a rock face looking for the next finger hold, if you're skiing downhill at 60 miles an hour and you're going around a corner, if you're not completely concentrated, then you could go over a cliff and you'd be dead. I think that's one reason why a lot of people like driving fast or riding fast on motorbikes, because dangerous sports in general involve this sense of complete concentration in the present. So I think that's one way in which we do actually have a sense of being really in the present. Of course, these mystical moments, these moments of being completely in the present don't last long usually, so they do slip into the past. But while they happen, they seem utterly real to those who experience them. And they do give the sense it's possible to be much more concentratedly in the present. I think that many, in nature, many things are in the process of becoming. Animals and plants are growing or developing or behaving or feeding their young or doing things, one thing or another. But in the physical world, there are certain situations where things achieve a state of closer to being. And I think that would be true of crystals, for example. While a crystal is crystallizing, it's becoming. Molecules are joining together in the right order and the crystal's growing. But once it's grown, think, for example, of a quartz crystal that may have formed millions of years ago. When you go to the geological section of the Natural History Museum, there are all these specimens of rocks and crystals that have been there for millions of years. I think from the point of view of a rock, where the crystal, where the main activity is repetitive, the electrons around the molecules are just whizzing around frictionlessly, surrounding the molecules. Within the atoms, they're whizzing around, repeating all the time through repeating their movements, their circuits. And the entire crystal has vibration patterns within it, which repeat endlessly. So I think they may have a kind of sense of presence rather different from our own, because there's much less change going on. So the 2 points I make is, one, mystical experience gives us this sense of being utterly in the present. And I think that physical systems that aren't becoming achieve a state of being. Of course, it doesn't last forever, but it lasts a lot longer than we do.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below.
With a free trial, you can enjoy the full talk and thousands more.
Thank you for being part of the conversation.